It was a self-imposed rule. Valerie Justice would not date anyone until her 15-year-old daughter, Erin, graduated high school in their Naperville, Illinois town.
Erin and I were extremely close. I had been divorced for 6 years, and she was the joy of my life. I wanted to get married again, but I wanted to concentrate on getting her through high school first. After that, I could get on with my own personal life.
But in 2003, when Erin spent her summer vacation with her father, Valerie soon felt a void in her heart.
I missed Erin tremendously, so I would visit my mother often because we lived not too far away from each other. And she was retired, and she was babysitting all the time.
And one afternoon, while visiting her mother, Valerie was happy to bump into a familiar face, 37-year-old Lawrence Lovejoy.
My mother had started babysitting for his little girl. And so many times when I would go by my mom's house, he was there. Lawrence was going through a divorce, and he was actually spending quite a bit of time there at my mom's. He was a little rough around the edges, just a t-shirt and jeans kind of person. But he was funny, and he was very charming.
Well, Lawrence was easygoing, and he was easy to talk to. He worked as a painter, and he was trying to get back on his feet.
Lawrence had been mentioned to my mother that he was looking for a place to stay. So I made the suggestion that since Erin was gone for the summer, he could share my apartment. He'd have a place to stay, I'd have some help with the rent. And I thought that would be a good arrangement.
Lawrence thought so too, and was more than happy to accept.
I would look forward to going home knowing that someone was there. He was rather entertaining, he made me laugh, and we started spending time together.
My sister Valerie was very serious, and Lawrence was the funny guy. Valerie needed that break in her seriousness by his sense of humor.
By the end of the summer, Valerie decided to break her own rule.
One of the goals that he had expressed to me was to own a home. And I've always wanted to own my own home. He wanted to really progress through life. I found myself attracted to him, and then we ended up in a relationship.
But when Erin returned home in August, she made it known she wasn't keen on having a man around the house.
It was hard for her to imagine anyone else being in the house besides her and I. She didn't want to lose her privacy. But I did not want to end the relationship.
But Valerie did want to do things right.
So at that point in my life, it was my desire to be more Christian. I did not want to continue to live with Lawrence without being married to him.
So Lawrence came up with the perfect solution.
Lawrence looked me straight in the face and told me,
I'm ready.
And would I marry him?
Yes, yes.
So I did say yes, that I would marry him.
After 4 months together, Valerie and Lawrence tied the knot at the local courthouse with Erin by their side.
So it was a simple ceremony. No big wedding dress, no flowers. We walked out and we were holding hands and we were on our way. The future seemed very bright.
But that brightness would soon turn to darkness as Valerie realized the choice she made would destroy everything she held dear.
He had a whole nother side to him.
She had no idea this monster was lurking in her house.
I just cried and cried. I just could not believe that he would do something so vicious.
In November of 2003, newlyweds Valerie Justice and Lawrence Lovejoy were eager to start their life together with Valerie's teenage daughter, Erin.
I was excited. I had everything that at this point that I desired. I had my daughter by my side. I was married again. And we started the process of trying to see if we could qualify for a mortgage and buy a home.
It was very important to Valerie to become a homeowner. They were on the hunt for the right house that they could all be happy in.
But the following month, Valerie came home to find Lawrence and Aaron in a screaming match.
Lawrence was so enraged. They were yelling back and forth. He was very upset that Aaron had been on the phone all afternoon, supposedly talking to boys. I didn't quite understand why he was so concerned.
There was a disconnect in their parenting styles. Lawrence felt he was going to be the one to discipline her, but Valerie didn't feel it was Lawrence's place.
I informed him that any decisions that had to do with Aaron were to be totally left up to me. He really got upset because I was basically telling him that I don't need your help. And he wasn't happy about that.
So Valerie did her best to smooth things over.
I talked to Aaron and, asked her to just wait until I'm home, before you get on the phone, and then that way there won't be any problems.
For the next few months, things seemed to be going according to plan.
There were no more big blowouts between Aaron and Lawrence. We bought a new puppy for the family, and we're making plans to purchase a townhome.
But there were a few sacrifices. Valerie took on a second job as a cashier to earn extra money for closing costs, which meant Aaron was at times a latchkey kid.
Erin would come home on her own, and I would call her and check in on her. So, we had a good system of keeping in touch with each other. Plus, Lawrence was home during the day, and then he worked the midnight shift at his company.
And Valerie couldn't help but notice that Aaron and Lawrence seemed to be fighting less often.
Aaron was in driver's ed, and so Lawrence volunteered to take her out driving. When they got home, they were both laughing, and I was relieved to see that things were getting better.
So Valerie set her sights on the closing of their new house, which was set for March 5th, 2004. But just 2 days before the closing, when Valerie made a routine call home to check on Aaron, everything changed.
Aaron answered the phone, and I said, "What are you doing?" She sounded just kind of aloof.
Are you okay?
Like she was preoccupied.
Okay.
We got off the phone, but something just didn't sit right with me.
And when Valerie received a call just a short time later from a police officer, she knew in an instant something was terribly wrong.
Lawrence had a dark side.
It was just a nightmare.
I was in complete shock. What he did was just devastating.
On March 3rd, 2004, Valerie Justice felt a knot in her stomach after receiving a call from the local police.
The police officer said that they had my daughter. There was a problem.
Oh my God, what happened?
He said that I needed to come to this address he gave me. That's all he would tell me. I hung up the phone with him. I was scared. Now I'm like, what the heck's going on?
Valerie was in a panic as she immediately raced to the address.
I just had no idea what could possibly be the problem. When I arrived, the police officer immediately took me up to an apartment. There was a friend of Aaron's who she went to school with.
Officers led Valerie into the living room, where she found Aaron sitting on the couch, visibly shaken.
That's when the police officer told me, according to Aaron, that Lawrence had sexually assaulted her. So I said, "What do you mean?" Aaron said she had come home from track practice. And Lawrence offered to give her a massage. She told him to stop, and he just kept going. I was shocked. After all, he had a daughter of his own. And it really upset me. I was like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I'm listening to what she is saying, and I'm trying to absorb it all. I didn't want to believe that this was really happening. But I made it very clear to Erin that I was going to support her no matter what.
At the hospital, Valerie stood by Erin's side as a doctor administered a rape kit.
The doctor told me that there were no physical signs of penetration. That put a shadow of a doubt in my mind. I was struggling with the whole thing. I questioned her, and I said, if this for some reason was because you're having a problem with him, I said, tell me now, because this is pretty serious. But she assured me that she was telling the absolute truth.
At first, I just didn't believe it. I was like, no, that just can't be. He's just not like that.
Meanwhile, at the police station, Lawrence told investigators something else entirely.
Lawrence indicated that Erin was just upset at him because he had questioned her cell phone usage. And because he was questioning her, she made the entire story up.
Without a confession, police didn't have enough to hold him.
There was saliva found on her cheek and on her breast. And it was the decision of the DuPage County State's Attorney's Office not to file charges until the DNA results came back from the crime lab. So Lawrence was not arrested that evening.
In the meantime, Valerie had saved enough money to close on the townhouse herself and settled on a new living arrangement, which didn't include Lawrence.
I got everything moved, and I didn't really know where he was staying. And I told Lawrence I did not want him around my daughter until we had gotten the DNA results. If the DNA results came back positive, my plan was to divorce Lawrence immediately.
But just a few weeks later, Valerie found herself in a bind and was compelled to ask Lawrence for a favor.
The puppy had gotten sick and needed to have a follow-up appointment with the vet. I asked Lawrence, and he made the appointment, and he was going to take her to the vet.
There was no chance Erin would run into Lawrence at the house, since she was going to spend the week with her father. But at the last minute, Erin's father canceled.
He was supposed to pick her up in the morning, but he had called to say that he was not going to be able to do that. So I called Lawrence, and I told him that he would need to move the puppy's appointment.
Erin's gonna be there for you. Can't be there.
And then he said to me, okay, I will call the vet and do that right now. So I was relieved.
Within the hour, Valerie decided to check in on her daughter and make sure she was waking up.
When I called, I didn't get any answer. And I'm wondering, why isn't she answering? I started to get a little anxious. I finally went to my boss and I said, I just need to go home and check and see what's going on. I was thinking, maybe she just overslept, maybe she was in the shower. But, I had no idea. I had no idea.
And when Valerie arrived home, nothing could have prepared her for the horror she would find.
It was the most heinous attack that I have ever seen.
It was unimaginable what he did.
There was blood everywhere. My whole world just ended.
On the morning of March 27, 2004, Valerie Justice prayed that her daughter Erin was okay as she arrived home.
I started to call her name and was not getting any response. Immediately, I knew something was wrong. I got into the hallway, and I could tell there was something on the walls. I ran into her bedroom, and she's not in her bed. Across the hall was her bathroom. I pushed the bathroom door open. I saw Erin in the bathtub. There was blood all over the floor. I knew when I saw her that it was too late. I felt like I was suspended in space. I just felt like I was just spinning.
Stunned with horror, Valerie ran to the hall and called 911.
Now all I can remember is the dispatcher telling me that I have to stop screaming and that they were sending somebody over. I just sat down on the stairs. I couldn't move.
Police arrived within minutes and found that whoever had murdered Erin resorted to a disturbing level of violence.
Erin was stabbed, she was bludgeoned, and then she was drowned. Erin had lethal doses of cold medication in her system. I believe she was forced to take it. There was a rather deep knife wound to her neck. Whoever did this had a lot of hatred in them. It was the most brutal, vicious, heinous attack that I have ever seen.
And Lawrence Lovejoy quickly rose to the top of the list as a person of interest.
The next day, we began interviewing Lawrence Lovejoy. From 7 until 12:30, he could not account for what he did and where he was at. But we didn't have enough evidence to keep him, so we had to let him go.
As investigators continued to gather evidence, Valerie tried to come to grips with what had happened.
It was so hard to fathom that someone could be that evil and do that to a helpless child. I knew in my gut that Lawrence was responsible for my daughter's death.
So I went to Copley Hospital. When I got there, all the kids was there. And I realized that it was real.
3 months later, the DNA found on Erin during the alleged rape came back as a positive match to Lawrence Lovejoy. And when police identified Lawrence's footprint at the crime scene, there was no denying that he was Erin's killer.
I believe Lawrence Lovejoy went over there to try to talk her out of filing charges against him for a sexual assault because he thought the results would come back with his DNA. And Erin was not giving that to him. He killed her in such a brutal way, I think he just snapped.
On August 20th, 2004, Lawrence Lovejoy was arrested and charged with the first-degree murder of Erin Justice. 1 month later, he was indicted on charges of sexual assault and sexual abuse.
I was absolutely sick to my stomach. I felt responsible. It was me who allowed this monster into our lives. It hits me like a brick.
Valerie now realized that Lawrence must have become obsessed with Erin.
His rage about Erin being on the phone was out of place. He had some jealous rage against Erin talking to boys. I think the reason why Lawrence offered to take Erin driving that day was to gain her confidence. Maybe she would feel close to him. He didn't know my Erin.
In 2007, Lawrence Lovejoy went to trial and was found guilty of first-degree murder. In light of his conviction, the sexual assault and abuse charges were dropped. But because of a technicality with a blood test, the conviction was overturned 2 years later.
That was discouraging, but we knew we had to go to trial on this again. It was going to be another guilty.
Finally, in 2011, Lawrence Lovejoy was once again convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison.
It was rather bittersweet when Lawrence was convicted and didn't bring my daughter back. But I was glad that he couldn't be free to harm anyone else.
Today, Valerie is still haunted by Erin's death and wonders if she could have done more to protect her.
I never saw any sign that I needed to fear for my daughter's life. There just were no signs that he.
Living near a place called Holiday, Florida might seem like fun, but for Crystal Kunkel, life was far from a tropical vacation. In the spring of 2002, after ending a 3-year relationship with the father of her newborn, the 22-year-old found herself transforming from a carefree young woman into a caregiver.
It had been 4 months since the last relationship. I was a single mother working really long hours at a window treatment company. I had a 6-month-old son, and between working and taking care of my son, I felt like I was going to have to juggle work and motherhood alone forever.
Romance seemed like a thing of the past until one day that March when Crystal saw a glimmer of hope.
My dad and I worked together, and I saw him and this guy, and I noticed that he was attractive, good-looking.
This is my daughter, Crystal. Oh, I don't think we've met before.
As Crystal's father introduced her to Tommy Garcia, one of her co-workers, she could tell right away that the 28-year-old was different.
The first thing I noticed was he was outgoing and nice.
And her instinct was confirmed over the next several weeks.
Tommy treated me really nice and sweet, and he would chat in his spare time at work. It seemed like he really liked me. I decided to show Tommy a picture of my son.
Oh my gosh, he has your eyes. Beautiful.
Tommy told me that he also had a young son. He was trying to get full custody of him. It gave Tommy and I a connection and made me feel like he was a really good family guy.
A few weeks later, Crystal and Tommy were eager to take their idle office chit-chat off the clock.
We would spend time with my son and with his son. I was having a lot of fun, and we were really falling in love.
Over the next 4 months, the two became inseparable and decided to take the next step.
I love being here with you. What if I moved in here with you?
Of course.
It was great to have someone you could finally connect with and help raise my son. Tommy was like a single mother's dream come true.
So when Tommy took Crystal out for a romantic dinner on March 29, 2003, and popped the question,
Crystal, will you be my lawfully wedded wife?
Yeah.
she didn't have to think twice.
Tommy seemed to be nice and genuine. And he treated my grandson wonderfully. And I was very happy for both of them.
Although the lovebirds initially planned their nuptials for the following year, another joyous event soon eclipsed those plans.
About 6 months later, we found out we would be having a baby. So we decided to postpone the wedding.
In February of 2004, Crystal gave birth to another bouncing baby boy, while Tommy gained custody of his 6-year-old son and adopted Crystal's first child. And 1 year later, the two were united as one in a magical wedding ceremony.
I had the perfect dress, perfect cake, everything was perfect.
It was a very good wedding, very nice, perfect start to a family.
We were both really happy. But having all these kids, we needed a little bit more money, so I decided that I would work at a local pharmacy, and Tommy took a job at a landscaping company.
For the next 6 years, the Garcias lived busy lives with a full howling week. Citing more tire trouble, Crystal was puzzled.
He said, well, they must have never fixed it right the first time. I didn't have really any reason to doubt him, but I thought it was really weird.
Then, a few weeks later, things took an even stranger turn.
We were getting ready to head out for the day, and my son asked me for a toy out of the car. So I went to the car. I was looking for my son's toy. I saw this gun laying underneath the seat.
What are you doing?
In November 2011, after finding a gun in her husband Tommy's car, Crystal Garcia was starting
Getting so mad about, then he justified it, saying he played with it at work. I guess they would do different guy things during lunch. I thought they're all guys that work together. Maybe they do play with pellet guns, I don't know.
Why is it underneath the seat with all the toys? What if one of the kids had found it?
Look, it's nothing, all right? Just relax. I got it.
I thought it was kind of weird and suspicious that he was so mad about the situation.
Then, a few weeks later, as the couple attended a family event, Crystal noticed something creepy.
Tommy was talking to two young teenage girls, telling them that they were smart and beautiful.
You're going out really nicely.
It seemed really inappropriate, and the girls felt a little uncomfortable by the advance he had made.
It turned the picnic into an awkward situation. I just found it very off base and unacceptable.
I felt embarrassed, so I confronted Tommy. He said that they'd taken it all wrong. That wasn't what he meant by it. He just justified it again, that everything was fine.
And on the night of February 15th, 2012, her husband's strange behavior reached its peak.
Tommy would play basketball with his friends, and he would usually come home around 10 o'clock at night, and it was getting to be 11:30 at night, and I started to get worried. And I was mad because he was out so late and he hadn't called.
Finally, Tommy walked in the door.
It's about time.
He was hyper, he was talking really fast. He was really excited. So I said, "What are you doing coming home so late?" He didn't think it was a big deal that he didn't call or anything. He said, "I had to get the tire filled up with air." I was angry that it was another tire story. Just didn't really seem like it could be true.
Air in the tire.
Yeah, in the gas station. I found this phone.
Then he told me that he also found this phone by the air pumps. He said it's a brand new phone. He said he checked in the gas station and they didn't know who it belonged to.
Nobody claimed it, so I figured one of our kids could use it.
Then he told me that he wanted to give our son the cell phone. I asked to look at the phone, but he wouldn't let me see it. He said that there was no information on it. It had been wiped clean. I thought it was kind of weird that there was this new phone that all the information had been erased from. I didn't really think it made sense.
Crystal told me Tommy was acting a little odd, and I told her just to keep her eyes open and make sure he's not just telling stories.
I found Tommy's behavior really confusing, and I didn't really know what to do to get to the bottom of it.
But Crystal wouldn't have to wait long.
The next night I was at work and I got a phone call.
Hello?
It was Tommy. He said that I needed to come home.
I need you to come home right away.
What's going on?
Miss Garcia?
Police officer got on the phone. I thought, oh my God.
In February 2012, after getting a call from her husband Tommy, Crystal Garcia was completely caught off guard when a police officer got on the line and said Tommy was being arrested.
What's going on?
The police officer said, "You're gonna need to come home and watch the kids."
And then the police officer told her why.
What?
I was completely shocked, and I thought there was some kind of mistake. I couldn't believe my husband could do that.
I'm on my way.
Her mind reeling, Crystal raced home.
I pulled onto our street. There was cop cars everywhere. My car was being seized. It was like something out of a movie. I was completely shocked, completely devastated that everything seemed to be falling apart right in front of me. The kids were in the window. Seeing the kids, the lights flashing, it was all like a nightmare. And my sons were looking at their father in handcuffs in front of the house. I felt that they shouldn't have to see something like that. They're probably scared.
Miss Garcia, can't talk to him right now. We're going to process them.
The cops didn't let me say anything. They didn't let him talk. They just told him, kiss me goodbye.
The next morning, when Tommy called from jail, he assured his wife that it was all a huge misunderstanding.
He told me that he did know the woman, and he said, it's not what you think. I gave a girl a ride home once, and she'd made an advance, and he'd turned her down, and she was upset and accusing him of rape. I thought that was a little weird. But I felt like there was really no reason for me not to trust him. I just hoped that it was true what he was saying.
But when a detective showed up the next day, her faith in Tommy's story really began to wane.
He said this girl who had been raped lost something, and we've been looking for it, and we can't seem to find it anywhere.
You haven't found your cell phone.
And I said, oh my God.
Crystal's heart sank as she remembered Tommy giving their son a cell phone he said he found. And then the detective dropped a bombshell.
3 additional rape charges in place against Tommy.
Altogether, there's 4 rape charges and 2 kidnapping charges.
The detective explained that after Tommy's arrest, they discovered evidence that could tie him to 3 other rapes.
It felt like the whole world was crashing down. I was completely devastated. I couldn't believe that this could happen.
Crystal tried to stand on her own and try to muscle through it. She wanted to believe her husband was innocent. She wanted to believe that in the worst way.
I wanted to see what was really going on. So I got the police records at the county building, and I read the whole report.
Crystal was completely blindsided as she read that Tommy had admitted to being with all the victims. Devastated, she immediately confronted her husband at jail the next day.
Stop.
I said, I just looked at the police report, and it says you admitted to the police that you were with all of these women.
You read her report.
I said, you told me that everybody was lying, the cops were lying, and this girl was lying. I said, at what point are you lying?
God, tell me the truth.
It was really the first moment where I knew he was lying.
Believe me.
I was really mad that not only that he'd done it, that he led me on to believe that he didn't do it. It was just coming to me all at once. I couldn't believe that he could do this to me, to the kids, to everybody. So I decided I was filing for a divorce. I felt like this is it. I'm done.
And as prosecutors prepared for Tommy's trial, Crystal would finally learn the whole truth. And it was more horrendous than she could have possibly imagined.
It was unbelievable.
This was just the tip of the iceberg.
It was just unreal to believe. I felt like I was with somebody I never knew.
In July of 2013, Crystal Garcia was still in shock when her husband Tommy went to trial for sexual battery and kidnapping and had been charged with 3 other possible rapes.
I had cried pretty much every day, like I couldn't believe that this had happened to me and happened to the kids.
In court, the horrible details of the crime finally came to light.
The night he came home from basketball with the cell phone, Tommy had been driving down the road and he saw a woman.
Tommy drove by this woman and asked her if she wanted a ride.
said no.
He came back a second time. And she said no again.
I said, get in the car!
They drove up to the wooden area. He forced her out of the car and performed several sexual acts.
Then he took her phone so she wasn't able to call for help. And as she was driving away,
she was able to follow his taillights out of the area. She was able to flag down a motorist and call the police. She was able to give a description of the car and actually a description of the perpetrator. Police used that information to put together a DMV photo array from which she was able to identify Tommy Garcia.
Between the victim's testimony, her cell phone, and DNA evidence that conclusively linked him to the crimes, there was no denying Tommy was the rapist. On July 26, 2013, after 2 days of testimony, Tommy Garcia was found guilty on both counts.
It was completely crazy that he definitely did it, that this was him. It was just unreal to believe.
It's a shocking thing to think somebody you've been married to is someone like that, a monster.
On the same day as the verdict, Tommy Garcia was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences and labeled a sexual predator. 7 months later, he pled guilty to the 3 other rape cases and received a 15-year sentence.
I felt like I was with somebody I never knew. I was devastated. I couldn't believe that I'd married somebody that was capable of something so horrible.
Knowing the awful truth about her husband, Crystal couldn't help but wonder if there were even more victims out there.
The times when he was having car problems, I wonder if there was more to it.
And she could barely stomach thinking of the young girls he had flirted with.
I worry that when he looked at other young people that maybe he had ulterior motives.
It's really unusual for someone who rapes to not have a history of other kind of violent or aggressive behavior. But we are not surprised to find that there may be others, and we have to hope others who have been their victims will come forward.
Seems just so unreal that he was somebody that I lived with. You know, you lock your doors every night and try to keep the bad people out, and really, I just locked the bad person in.
Never rings again. A house with its lights still on at dawn. A calendar frozen on a date that no longer makes sense. California, late summer of 1998. The air is dry, heavy with heat, the kind that presses against the skin and refuses to let go. In a quiet residential neighborhood, a place where garage doors open every morning at the same hour and neighbors recognize each other's cars by sound alone, something slips out of alignment. A woman does not show up for work. She does not answer her pager. Her voicemail fills, then locks. By mid-afternoon, the word missing begins to circulate, spoken first in whispers, then with urgency. Police arrive to a scene that feels wrong in ways that are difficult to articulate. The front door is unlocked. Inside, nothing appears overtly disturbed. No shattered glass. No overturned furniture. The television sits dark, the remote placed neatly on the arm of the couch. A half-finished cup of coffee rests on the kitchen counter. Cold now. A faint ring left behind like a watermark of a moment interrupted. Her purse is still here. Her keys. Her car remains parked in the driveway. There are no signs of a struggle. No blood. No note. Just absence. Detectives walk through the house slowly, instinctively lowering their voices, as if someone might still be sleeping in the next room. They photograph every surface, every doorway, every corner where shadows gather. Drawers are opened, closets checked. In the bedroom, the bed is made. Shoes are lined up with deliberate care. A life paused mid-sentence. Outside, neighbors gather in small clusters, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the flashing lights. This is not supposed to happen here. This is California suburbia at the end of the 90s, a time of optimism, economic boom, the belief that the worst things happen somewhere else to someone else. By nightfall, the word spreads faster. News vans appear. Reporters speak into microphones with solemn urgency. Mysterious disappearance. No suspects at this time. Community in shock. Within 48 hours, the case hardens into something colder, heavier. The missing woman's name is printed on flyers. Her face stares out from telephone poles and grocery store bulletin boards. A tip line is established. Calls flood in, sightings, theories, rumors. Most of them leading nowhere. Investigators reconstruct her last known movements with forensic precision. Who she spoke to, where she went, what time she left work the previous evening. A routine drive home. A stop at a local store. A receipt time-stamped just before sunset. Grainy security footage shows her walking out, bag in hand, glancing briefly toward the parking lot. It is the last confirmed image of her alive. Then the trail dissolves. Days stretch into weeks, weeks into months. The initial intensity fades, replaced by quiet persistence. Detectives keep returning to the same questions, the same unanswered gaps. If she left willingly, why take nothing? If she was taken, where is the evidence? If this was random, why her? They search nearby fields, drainage canals, wooded areas along the outskirts of town. Cadaver dogs move methodically through brush and dirt, noses low, tails stiff. Nothing. The case file thickens. Statements are logged. Alibis checked and rechecked. Former partners, casual acquaintances, co-workers. Everyone is questioned. Everyone insists on the same thing. She was careful, predictable, not the type to vanish. At night, detectives lie awake replaying the details, haunted by the ordinariness of it all. Crimes, they know, often announce themselves with chaos. This one arrived quietly, almost politely, and that is what makes it dangerous. A year passes. Then two. The media moves on. New tragedies replace old ones. Flyers fade in the sun, their edges curling, the ink slowly washing out until her face becomes a ghost of itself. The community learns how to speak her name in the past tense without fully realizing when that transition happened. Inside the department, the file is boxed, labeled, and shelved, not closed, never closed, but placed among dozens of others under the unspoken category that every investigator dreads. Cold case. The term sounds clinical, almost gentle. In reality, it is brutal. It means no answers. It means families trapped in permanent limbo. It means a crime scene that grows colder with every passing year. Evidence degrading, memories blurring, witnesses aging, dying. Occasionally, something stirs. A tip from a psychic. A jailhouse rumor. A man who claims to know something, then recants. Each time, detectives reopen the box, spread the files across a table, chase the thread until it snaps. Each time, the same ending. Dead end. By the mid-2000s, the case has become a cautionary tale within the department. New detectives are assigned to review it with fresh eyes, tasked with finding what others missed. They notice small things. A timeline discrepancy. A statement that feels rehearsed. A neighbor who remembers hearing something unusual that night. A car door? Maybe, or voices, but can no longer be sure. Time is the enemy now. Physical evidence is sparse, but it exists. Items collected from the home. Clothing. Fingernail scrapings. Samples preserved in evidence lockers. Sealed in plastic. Cataloged and forgotten as forensic technology races forward without them. Then, quietly, something changes. In a different part of California, years later, a lab technician tests an unrelated case using a new DNA amplification technique. The results are astonishing. Profiles once thought unusable now speak. Partial samples become viable. Contamination can be filtered. Noise reduced. The impossible suddenly is not. Word travels slowly at first, then faster. Cold case units begin reopening files that had gathered dust for decades. Evidence boxes are retrieved, reopened under sterile conditions. Samples are retested, not with hope. Hope has burned too many times before, but with discipline. In this case, one envelope stands out. Inside it, a trace so small it was once considered meaningless. Skin cells. A transfer. Something that could have come from a handshake, a brush past a shoulder, or something far more violent. In 1998, it was a question mark. Now, it is a voice. The lab runs the analysis twice. Then again. Profile begins to form. It does not match anyone in the system. Not yet. Investigators enter it into databases that did not exist when the woman disappeared. National indexes. Genetic genealogy platforms. Family trees built from strangers who have no idea they are about to brush against a crime buried in the past. Weeks go by. Then one afternoon, an analyst freezes mid-sentence. Partial match. Not the suspect, but a relative. The room changes instantly. Phones are silenced. Doors close. Screens glow with branching family lines. Names stretching back generations. Somewhere in this web is the person who left that DNA behind. Someone who walked free for decades, unaware that science had been quietly catching up. Detectives feel something they haven't felt in years. Movement. The cold case is no longer still. Outside the department, the community remains unaware. Life continues. New families move into old houses. Children grow up never knowing the name of the woman who vanished before they were born. But beneath the surface, the past is beginning to breathe again. And for the first time since 1998, the silence around this case does not feel permanent. Feels fragile. The first rule of a revived cold case is silence. No leaks. No speculation. No celebrations too early. Investigators have learned this the hard way. When hope arrives after years of nothing, it has a tendency to run ahead of the facts. And facts, in cases like this, are fragile. The partial DNA match sits on the screen like a loaded weapon. Not a name. Not yet. Just a genetic echo, close enough to matter, distant enough to be dangerous if misunderstood. A familial hit. A sibling, a child, a cousin. Someone who shares blood with the person who was inside that house in 1998, close enough to leave a trace behind. The analysts build the family tree branch by branch. Birth records, marriage licenses, death certificates, census data, old addresses, people who moved, divorced, disappeared from paper trails. The tree spreads outward, then inward again, narrowing. Patterns emerge. Men in the right age range. Men who lived nearby at the time. Men who crossed paths with the victim in ways that once seemed insignificant. One name appears, then disappears. Another stays. Detectives begin reconstructing the neighborhood as it existed in 1998, not as it looks now. They pull aerial photographs from archives. They study zoning maps, traffic patterns, bus routes that no longer run. Who lived where? Who worked nights? Who had access without raising suspicion? They revisit interviews conducted decades earlier, listening now not for what was said, but for what was avoided. Long pauses, nervous laughter, statements that were technically true but emotionally hollow. A man who volunteered information no one asked for. Another who claimed he remembered nothing. Not because of trauma, but because he said it had been just another day. In cold cases, the past lies. Not maliciously. It lies because time smooths sharp edges. Because people forget what they feared. Because guilt dulls into routine. One detective notices something small, almost insulting in its simplicity. A note scribbled in the margin of an old report. Lived 2 blocks away. Moved shortly after disappearance. At the time, it meant nothing. People move all the time. But now, with the family tree narrowing, it glows. They run the name again. Different databases this time. Employment records. Traffic citations. Rental agreements. A minor arrest years later for an unrelated offense. Dismissed. Forgotten. Enough to put his fingerprints on file. Enough to confirm a timeline. They do not rush. They watch. The suspect is older now, grayer, slower. A life built carefully, layer by layer, on top of something buried. A job, family, children who know him only as a father, a neighbor, a man who waves politely and keeps his lawn trimmed. No criminal record that would raise alarms. No obvious red flags. If he did this, he did it once. Or he did it better than anyone ever realized. Surveillance begins quietly. Trash pulls. Public movements. Social media profiles scanned for cracks. Nostalgia. Confessions disguised as jokes. Late-night posts that drift too close to regret. Nothing obvious surfaces. He appears normal, ordinary, and that terrifies the investigators more than any visible monster would. They know this type, the kind that understands routine, the kind that blends in, the kind that commits a crime and then survives it. Meanwhile, the victim's family is still in the dark. Investigators debate when or if to tell them. After decades of pain, false hope would be its own cruelty. So they wait, holding the weight of the truth like a fragile object that could shatter if mishandled. The lab work continues. More samples are tested. Fibers, microscopic debris preserved in envelopes yellowed by time. Each result is cross-referenced, triple-checked. The science must be airtight. A cold case reopened is a promise and a threat. If they get this wrong, there will be no second chance. Then the confirmation arrives. The DNA profile extracted from the 1998 evidence matches, with staggering statistical certainty, a direct relative of the suspect under surveillance. The probability is not speculative, not circumstantial. It is mathematical, the kind of number that stops conversations mid-sentence. The room goes quiet. No one smiles. This is the moment where cases either explode or collapse. Detectives begin the slow march toward confrontation. They review every legal step. Warrants drafted, redrafted, scrutinized. The district attorney insists on caution. A suspect who has lived free for decades will fight like someone with everything to lose, because he does. They need more than DNA. They need narrative, motive, opportunity. The story of how a normal evening in 1998 became a permanent scar. They re-examine the victim's life, her routines, her relationships. A casual connection resurfaces, a place they both frequented. A mundane overlap once dismissed as coincidence. Now it feels deliberate. A coworker from that time recalls something new, or perhaps something old that suddenly matters. A man who lingered too long. A glance that made her uncomfortable, brushed off as paranoia. It was never reported. Why would it be? Nothing happened until it did. Investigators reconstruct the night again, minute by minute. They overlay timelines like transparent sheets. The suspect's alibi holds on paper, but paper is forgiving. Receipts can be planted. Memories coached. What cannot be coached is movement. Cell phone records, primitive in 1998 but not non-existent, reveal gaps. A phone that went silent at exactly the wrong time. They visit the house where the suspect lived back then. New owners now. Fresh paint. Different furniture. The past sealed behind drywall. But outside, the distance to the victim's home is measured again. A short walk. Too short to notice. Too short to attract attention. The theory sharpens. An encounter that escalated. A moment of panic. A decision made too fast to undo. Still, one question rots at the center of the case. Where is she? No body. No burial site. No confession. A solved cold case without remains is a legal minefield. Juries want closure. Families want answers. Investigators want proof that cannot be explained away. They search again. This time with purpose. Locations connected to the suspect are mapped. Old job sites, properties tied to relatives. Land that changed hands quietly in the early 2000s. Ground-penetrating radar scans soil that has not been disturbed in years. Cadaver dogs return to places they once passed through blindly, guided now by data instead of desperation. The community begins to feel it before it knows it. Police vehicles seen where they haven't been in decades. Unmarked cars parked too long on quiet streets. Whispers begin again. Something is happening. Something old. Local reporters catch wind of renewed activity. Phone calls flood the department. Officials offer only rehearsed lines. Ongoing investigation. No further details at this time. But the phrase cold case slips out during a broadcast, and that is enough. People Google. They remember. They realize this never went away. The suspect senses it too. Behavior changes subtly. A man who once followed routine now breaks it. Different routes. Glances over the shoulder. A sudden interest in news coverage he claims not to care about. The mask begins to slip, not dramatically, but enough. Investigators schedule the interview. Not an arrest. Not yet. Just a conversation. They choose the setting carefully. Neutral ground. Non-threatening. A chance for him to talk himself free or into a corner. They know men like this often believe they are smarter than the system, especially after beating it for so long. The day arrives. He walks in calm, measured, polite. He smiles at the detective as if greeting an old acquaintance. He agrees to talk. Why wouldn't he? He has nothing to hide. At least that is what he tells himself. The recorder clicks on. Questions begin gently. Background. Memories of the neighborhood. Of the victim's name. He claims not to recognize it at first, then says it sounds familiar. Of course it does. Everyone knew everyone back then. Then the tone shifts. Timelines are presented. Facts laid out with precision. His answers slow. He chooses words carefully now. Too carefully. He denies ever being inside her house. Denies knowing her beyond passing hellos. The detective nods. Then mentions DNA. Just once. Casually. Like an afterthought. The room changes. His breathing does not stop. His heart does not race visibly. But something behind his eyes tightens. The past, dormant for decades, wakes up violently. He asks what kind of DNA. Where? How? Too many questions. Asked too fast. The detective does not answer. He just watches. This is not a confession. But it is not innocence either. And for the first time since 1998, the man who vanished from suspicion steps fully into the light. The cold case is no longer theoretical. It has a face. The silence after the interview lingers longer than the questions themselves. When the suspect leaves the room, the air feels altered, heavier, as if something unseen has passed through and left a residue behind. The recorder is switched off, but no one speaks. Detectives sit still, replaying every hesitation, every micro-expression, every moment where confidence slipped and calculation replaced it. They do not call it evidence. Not yet. They call it signal. In cold cases, signal is everything. It is the faint pattern beneath the noise, the rhythm that tells you where to look next. The interview did not produce a confession, but it produced movement, and movement after decades of stillness is dangerous for the person being watched. Surveillance intensifies. The suspect returns to his life, but it is no longer the same life. He checks his mirrors more often. He lingers before opening his front door, scanning the street like someone who expects the past to step out from behind a parked car. He stops answering certain calls. He deletes messages. A man who once lived comfortably inside his routine now lives inside his head. Investigators trace his steps backward, not forward. They know the mistake most criminals make is trying to clean up after the fact, even years later. Old storage units are revisited. Properties once owned or rented briefly are mapped. A forgotten cabin, a leased warehouse space. A stretch of land purchased under a relative's name and sold quickly after the disappearance. Each location is a question mark. They find nothing at first. Then, in a box pulled from an evidence locker, something surfaces that had been overlooked not because it was insignificant, but because it was too ordinary. A small item collected from the victim's home, catalogued and forgotten among hundreds of others. At the time, it told no story. Now it whispers one. The lab receives it with caution. Gloves, masks, chain of custody verified down to the minute. If this case goes to court, the defense will attack everything. Procedures, storage, contamination, intent. The science must be untouchable. The results come back late at night. A second DNA profile. Partial, degraded, but compatible. Not from the same person as before, but connected. Someone who was there. Someone whose presence does not belong. The probability numbers stack on top of each other. Not conclusive alone, but devastating together. Investigators look at the board again. The web tightens. They revisit the suspect's family tree, now with a new lens. Relationships that once seemed distant now feel intimate. Brothers, cousins, a childhood friend who was more than a friend. Someone who could have been present, someone who could have helped, or someone who could have been used as cover. The theory evolves. This may not have been a solitary act. That realization changes everything. Cold cases often survive because they are simpler than the truth. One suspect, one crime, one bad decision. But when complexity enters the picture, when multiple people share a secret, the silence can last for generations. Detectives begin interviewing again. Old witnesses, old neighbors, people who once said nothing because they had nothing to say, or because they thought nothing mattered. Time has changed them. Fear has softened. Loyalty has decayed. Guilt has matured into something that wants relief. A former neighbor remembers an argument. Not loud, not violent, just sharp. Words exchanged in a driveway late one night. She didn't think it was important then. People argue all the time. Now she can remember exactly where she was standing. The way the streetlight flickered. The tone of the man's voice, controlled, but furious. Another witness recalls a car leaving the neighborhood too fast, tires biting into asphalt. At the time, it blended into the background of teenage recklessness and weekend noise. Now it stands alone. Each memory is fragile. Each one risks collapsing under cross-examination. But together they begin to form a shape. Meanwhile, the suspect's behavior continues to shift. He contacts a lawyer for reasons he cannot articulate without admitting fear. He claims it is just in case. Just in case of what he does not say. He avoids certain places. He stops visiting a relative he once saw weekly. Distance becomes his shield. Investigators read this not as guilt, but as strategy. They push again. This time not with confrontation, but with pressure applied indirectly. A search warrant is executed at a property tied to his past. News helicopters circle. Cameras capture images of investigators carrying boxes out into daylight. The footage airs that night. The community watches. They do not know his name yet, but they know the case. They know the year. They know the woman who disappeared and never came home. The phrase cold case is spoken again. Louder this time, sharper. The suspect watches too. He sees his world shrinking. Inside the department, the debate begins. Arrest now or wait. The DNA is strong, but not perfect. The narrative is compelling, but still circumstantial. A premature arrest could blow the case apart. A delayed one could allow evidence to vanish forever. They decide to wait. Instead, they return to the question that refuses to be quiet. Where is she? The answer may not be buried in dirt. It may be buried in someone else. They examine phone records again, this time focusing on people connected to the suspect. Calls made after midnight. Numbers dialed once, never again. A landline that rang for 90 seconds and went unanswered. In 1998, that meant nothing. Now, it feels intentional. They locate the number. It belongs to a man who moved out of state shortly after the disappearance. He is older now. Sick. Tired. Less interested in protecting a secret that no longer protects him. When detectives approach him, he is defensive at first, then resigned. He does not confess. He does not deny. He says something else. I thought you forgot about that. The sentence lands like a blow. In the interview room, his hands tremble as he speaks. He admits knowing the suspect, admits being with him that night, admits something went wrong. His version is fragmented, self-serving, but it cracks the case open in ways DNA alone never could. He claims he did not hurt her, that he panicked, that he helped clean up because he was scared, that he believed she was already dead when he arrived. Each claim contradicts another. Each one implicates him deeper. Detectives let him talk. They know memory under guilt is unreliable, but guilt itself is powerful. It reshapes stories around survival, not truth. Still, the core remains. She did not vanish. She was silenced. The man describes a location vague, uncertain, altered by time. A place that may no longer exist as it once did. Construction, development, earth moved and remade. Even if they search, they may never find her. But they try. Search teams return to the field, now armed with testimony. The ground is scanned. Dogs work methodically, their handlers watching for any change in behavior. For days, nothing happens. Then a dog stops. The handler freezes. The ground is marked. Excavation begins carefully, almost reverently. Soil is removed inch by inch. Cameras record everything. The air feels electric, charged with expectation and dread. And then they hit something. Not bone. Not yet. Fabric. Old. Degraded. A color that once meant something. Now it means everything. The site is secured. The excavation expands. More material surfaces. Buttons. Threads. Items that match what she was last seen wearing. The ground gives up its secret reluctantly. By nightfall, there is no denying it. After decades of uncertainty, the missing has become the found. The cold case, once defined by absence, now has a physical weight. But resolution does not bring peace. It brings consequence. Because now, the question is no longer what happened. It is who will answer for it. And the man who has lived freely since 1998 knows the endgame has begun. The ground does not give up the past easily. Even now, as soil is peeled back under harsh lights and silent cameras, it resists, clinging to what it has held for so long. Investigators stand shoulder to shoulder at the edge of the excavation site, watching as fragments emerge. Each one a reminder that time does not erase violence, it only hides it. The first confirmed remains change everything. What was once a cold case defined by questions becomes a crime scene defined by facts. The air around the site tightens. Radios crackle. Protocols snap into place with mechanical precision. A forensic anthropologist kneels beside the shallow grave, brushing dirt away with a gentleness that feels almost out of place in such a brutal context. Bones are fragile now. Some have collapsed inward, weakened by decades underground. But they still tell a story. The way they are positioned, the depth of burial, the absence of personal items that should have been there. This was not accidental. This was deliberate. Word travels faster than the excavators can work. By morning, the perimeter is lined with yellow tape and curious eyes. Helicopters thrum overhead. News crews gather at a respectful distance. Microphones angled toward officials who are not ready to speak. The phrase "human remains" dominates headlines, paired instantly with the words everyone has been waiting to hear. Cold case. Solved. But inside the investigation, no one uses that word yet. They know better. The remains are transported under escort, sealed, documented, preserved. Every movement is logged. Every handoff recorded. In the lab, specialists begin the slow, meticulous process of confirmation. Dental records, bone structure, old X-rays retrieved from archives long thought irrelevant. Each comparison tightens the knot in the investigators' chests. When the confirmation arrives, it is absolute. It is her. The woman who walked out of a store in 1998 and never came home has been found. Not alive, not intact, but no longer missing. For her family, the call is devastating in ways that language fails to capture. Hope, grief, relief, rage. None of the emotions arrive alone. They collide. Investigators sit with them as the truth is delivered carefully, deliberately, knowing that every word will echo for the rest of their lives. They ask the same question everyone asks. Why did it take so long? There is no answer that satisfies. As the news breaks publicly, the community reacts in waves. Shock first, then anger, then a collective reckoning. People remember where they were when she disappeared. They remember the fear that lingered, the way parents held their children closer, the locks that clicked earlier at night. Now they learned that the threat was never distant. It lived among them. The suspect's name finally surfaces. Photographs flood screens, then and now. Side-by-side images show a young man with sharp features, confident eyes, transformed into someone older, heavier, more ordinary. The contrast is unsettling. Monsters are not supposed to age quietly. They are supposed to look like villains. This one looks like a neighbor. Pressure mounts instantly. The district attorney convenes an emergency meeting. The evidence is reviewed line by line. DNA, testimony, forensic findings, behavioral indicators. Each piece is strong, but the standard is unforgiving. Beyond a reasonable doubt, decades after the fact, against a man who will claim the past has been reconstructed unfairly. They authorize the arrest. Officers approach the suspect's home at dawn, the same way they approach all homes where history is about to fracture. Calm, controlled, irreversible. The knock is firm but not aggressive. When he opens the door, his face betrays nothing for a split second. Then something collapses. He does not resist. Handcuffs close around wrists that have not felt restraint since childhood. Neighbors watch from behind curtains. Phones rise quietly, recording the moment. Someone whispers his name. Someone else says they never suspected him. He is placed in the back of a patrol car, the door closing with a sound that feels final. Inside the interrogation room, the tone is different now. This is no longer a conversation. This is a reckoning. Detectives lay out the evidence without drama. The DNA, the location, the testimony from the man who broke his silence. The remains, finally recovered. They do not accuse. They do not raise their voices. They simply remove escape routes one by one. The suspect listens. At first, he denies everything. Then he shifts. Then he reframes. Then he minimizes. Each version contradicts the last. He claims confusion, claims memory loss, claims he was manipulated, that someone else led, that someone else decided. His voice cracks when he realizes none of it matters anymore. The past has caught him. When they show him photographs from the excavation site, something breaks. He looks away. He swallows hard. He asks for water. He asks for a lawyer. The interview ends there, suspended between what was said and what will never be said aloud. Charges are filed. Murder, accessory, conspiracy. Each count carries the weight of lost time. The legal process moves slowly, deliberately. Motions are filed. Evidence challenged. The defense argues contamination, unreliable witnesses, the fallibility of memory. They call it a tragedy compounded by modern overreach. A witch hunt fueled by technology. The prosecution counters with precision. They show timelines that align too perfectly to be coincidence. They demonstrate how the DNA could only belong to someone who was there. They present the remains, the location, the patterns that never changed. The courtroom becomes a theater of restraint. No outbursts, no theatrics, just the grinding exposure of truth. As the trial approaches, the community fractures again. Some demand maximum punishment. Others struggle with disbelief. A few cling desperately to the idea that this must still be wrong, that a mistake has been made, that the man they knew could not have done this. But the evidence does not care what anyone wants to believe. Behind the scenes, investigators feel something unfamiliar. Relief, yes, but also unease. Cold cases do not end cleanly. They leave scars on families, on communities, on the people who carried the weight of unanswered questions for decades. Even as the system moves toward resolution, the past refuses to stay buried. Because one detail remains unresolved. The suspect has not fully confessed. He has not explained why. He has not said what happened in the final moments. And he has not named everyone who was involved. As the trial looms, investigators wonder whether justice will be complete or merely partial. Whether truth will fully surface, or whether some secrets will die with the men who kept them. The remains have been found. The case has a body now, but the story is still unfinished. And somewhere, beneath the noise of headlines and court filings, The silence that defined this cold case for so long is preparing to speak one last time. The courtroom feels smaller than it should. Not physically, but emotionally, compressed by decades of waiting and the weight of a truth that has taken too long to arrive. Every bench is filled. Every breath sounds louder than usual. When the judge enters, the room rises as one, then settles back into a silence so tight it feels engineered. The defendant sits motionless at the table, hands folded, eyes fixed forward. He no longer looks like the man pulled from his home at dawn, stunned and pale. He looks prepared now, composed, armored by legal strategy and the belief that even now, after everything, the system might still fail to prove what he has carried for half his life. The prosecution begins without flourish. They do not dramatize the disappearance. They do not lean on grief. They open with facts, dates, locations, timelines, the calm recital of what happened, and more importantly, what did not. A woman who never arrived. A phone that stopped responding. A house that showed no sign of chaos because the chaos happened somewhere else. Jurors listen closely. Some take notes. Others watch the defendant, measuring his reactions, waiting for something, anything, that might betray him. He gives them nothing. The first witnesses establish context. Former detectives describe the early days of the investigation, the frustration, the unanswered questions. They explain how the case went cold not because of negligence, but because there was nothing left to chase. No suspect, no body, no confession. Then the science enters the room. An expert in forensic DNA analysis takes the stand, her voice steady, precise. She explains how the technology available in 1998 could not see what modern techniques reveal. She describes alleles and probabilities, degradation and amplification, how a microscopic trace can speak louder than an eyewitness who no longer remembers clearly. She presents the numbers. They are devastating. The likelihood that the DNA belongs to someone unrelated to the defendant is astronomically small. Not speculative. Not interpretive. Mathematical. Jurors lean forward. One presses her lips together, as if trying to contain a reaction. The defense cross-examines aggressively. They question storage conditions, chain of custody, the possibility of contamination. The expert answers calmly, dismantling each suggestion with methodical clarity. This evidence did not wander into the sample. It waited there. When the remains are introduced, the courtroom changes. Photographs are shown sparingly, respectfully, enough to confirm identity, not enough to sensationalize. Still, the effect is visceral. A collective intake of breath. Someone in the gallery quietly cries. The defendant stares at the table now, jaw clenched. A forensic anthropologist explains what the bones reveal. Trauma consistent with force. Positioning inconsistent with accidental death. Time of burial aligning with the disappearance. The language is clinical, but the meaning is brutal. She did not leave. She was placed. Then comes the witness everyone has been waiting for. The man who broke his silence. He enters the courtroom slowly, visibly aged, his health fragile. He avoids looking at the defendant as he is sworn in, as if proximity alone might contaminate him. His voice shakes when he begins, not from fear of the room, but from the memory he has spent decades trying not to revisit. He describes the night in fragments. An unexpected call. A request for help. A sense that something had already gone wrong before he arrived. He admits to terrible choices, choices made out of panic, out of loyalty, out of cowardice. He admits to helping hide the truth, to convincing himself that silence was survival. The defense attacks his credibility immediately. They call him a liar, a self-serving accomplice trying to save himself. They point out inconsistencies, gaps, the years he spent saying nothing. He does not argue. He agrees. He says that is why he waited so long. Because living with it was worse than prison. The courtroom holds its breath as he turns, finally, to look at the defendant. I thought if I didn't say it out loud, he says, voice breaking, it wouldn't be real. The defendant does not react. But the jurors do. The defense pivots. They introduce doubt where they can. Memory distortion, the power of suggestion, the danger of reconstructing a past under pressure. They suggest that the witness's guilt has reshaped his story, that he has assigned blame where it may not belong. They remind the jury that time changes everything. The prosecution responds with something simpler. They remind the jury that time does not invent DNA. As days pass, the narrative tightens. Phone records, maps, old receipts, small details that once seemed meaningless now align with unsettling precision. The suspect's movements, the victim's routine, the narrow window where everything went wrong. Still, one thing is missing: a full confession. The defendant chooses to testify. The decision shocks the courtroom. He takes the stand carefully, adjusting the microphone, glancing once at the jury. He speaks softly. He says he is sorry for the family's pain, but denies responsibility. He claims he was nearby that night, yes, but not involved. That the DNA could have transferred innocently. That he never intended harm. That he is being punished for proximity, not guilt. Under cross-examination, the cracks appear. He contradicts his own timeline. He struggles to explain why he lied in 1998. Why he moved shortly after the disappearance. Why he contacted a lawyer only after hearing the word DNA. His answers grow shorter. His patience thins. The prosecutor does not raise his voice. He simply asks one question. If you had nothing to hide, he says, why did you hide for 25 years? There is no good answer. Closing arguments arrive like controlled detonations. The prosecution speaks of silence, of how violence thrives in it, of how technology finally gave a voice to someone who was taken without one. The defense warns against certainty built on old memories and modern assumptions. The jury is sent away. The weight is unbearable. Hours stretch, then days. The community watches updates obsessively. The victim's family sits together, holding hands, bracing for either outcome. The defendant stares at the wall, expression unreadable. When the jury returns, the room stands again. The foreperson's hands tremble slightly as she reads the verdict. Guilty. On all counts. A sound escapes the gallery that is not quite a cheer, not quite a sob. The defendant closes his eyes. For a moment it looks like relief, or maybe surrender. Sentencing is scheduled. Justice, delayed but undeniable, has finally arrived. And yet, even as the courtroom empties, even as headlines declare closure, those closest to the case know something essential remains unresolved. Because conviction is not the same as confession. And the truth, whole and unfiltered, still lives locked inside a man who has spent most of his life perfecting silence. The verdict settles into the room like dust after an explosion. It does not bring silence so much as a different kind of noise, the quiet recalibration of lives that must now rearrange themselves around a truth they can no longer avoid. Outside the courthouse, cameras wait, engines idling, reporters rehearsing phrases that will soon sound inevitable. Inside, the people who carried this case for decades sit still, as if movement might fracture the fragile sense of finality they've just been handed. Sentencing does not happen immediately. Justice, even when decisive, prefers patience. Weeks pass. The defendant is returned to a cell, no longer a suspect, no longer a neighbor, now officially a murderer in the eyes of the state. The label follows him everywhere. On paperwork, in whispers, in the way guards look at him without curiosity. The victim's family returns home to a house that feels unfamiliar. Closure is supposed to feel like relief. Instead, it feels like gravity. There is grief for what was lost, and grief for the years spent waiting for an answer that arrived too late to save anything but the truth. They place a photograph on the mantel. Not the smiling one from the flyers, but a quieter image, one that reminds them she was real beyond the headlines. Investigators, too, feel the shift. Cold case work does not end with a verdict. It lingers. It revisits dreams. It follows you home at night, whispering questions you didn't think to ask when time was short and evidence was shorter. Some of them feel pride. Others feel exhaustion. All of them feel the weight of what it took to reach this moment. At sentencing, the courtroom is different. The energy is no longer electric. It is heavy, deliberate. The judge listens as the prosecution recites the impact statements. Voices trembling, hands shaking, words chosen carefully because there are some things language cannot fully contain. The family speaks of birthdays missed, of holidays that never felt complete, of a phone that rang too often and then not at all. The defendant listens again, head bowed, eyes fixed on nothing. When it is his turn, he stands slowly. He clears his throat. The room stills, anticipating a confession, a final acknowledgement, a sentence that might stitch together the last torn edge of the story. Instead, he offers an apology that sounds practiced. Regret without detail. Sorrow without admission. He does not say her name. He does not say what happened. He does not explain why a moment of violence became a lifetime of silence. The judge does not interrupt. Then the sentence is delivered. Decades in prison. No chance of parole for a long time. Words that will outlive the man who hears them. The gavel falls sharp and final, and the room exhales. But something else happens quietly after. In the days that follow, a letter arrives at the district attorney's office. Handwritten. No return address. Inside, a few pages filled with cramped script, the ink uneven, the tone shifting between defensiveness and something dangerously close to honesty. It is from the defendant. He does not confess outright. He circles the truth like a man testing ice. He writes about fear, about pressure, about a night that got out of control. He claims he did not intend to kill her, that it was an accident, that panic did the rest. He names no accomplices. He offers no new locations. But between the lines, something slips through. He was there. He knew. He chose silence. The letter is logged, archived, added to a file that may never be opened again. For investigators, it is both vindication and frustration. A final reminder that even when a case is solved, the truth rarely arrives whole. The community reacts in waves again. Some feel safer. Others feel betrayed. They replay memories, searching for signs they missed, moments where kindness may have been camouflage. Trust, once broken, does not heal easily. Cold cases do this. They reach backward and forward at the same time, altering the past and the future in equal measure. New calls begin to come in. People with old secrets, old guilt, old stories they once dismissed as irrelevant. A man calls to say he remembers seeing the defendant's car parked somewhere unusual that night. A woman writes to say she was warned away from him years ago but never understood why. Each piece arrives too late to matter legally, but not emotionally. For the family, the process of mourning begins again, this time without uncertainty. They plan a memorial. They choose music. They stand beside a grave that finally has a name on it, a date that makes sense. The earth is filled in carefully, deliberately, as if making up for the violence that once tore it open. Investigators attend quietly, standing at the back. They do not speak. They do not need to. This is not their moment. Their work is done. Or so it seems. Months later, another cold case unit in a neighboring county reviews their own unsolved disappearance from the late 90s. The details are different, but the pattern feels familiar. A quiet vanishing. A man who lived nearby. DNA that once meant nothing. They make a call. The ripple spreads. Cold cases, once awakened, do not return easily to sleep. Technology has changed the balance. Silence is no longer a guarantee. The past is no longer protected by time. For the man in prison, the days settle into routine. Count. Meals. Lights out. He is no longer in control of the narrative. Others will tell it now, investigators, journalists, historians of crime who will reduce his life to a case study, a cautionary tale about how far science can reach. For the victim, something like justice has arrived, late and imperfect, but real. And for the community, the lesson lingers in the quiet moments, in the locked doors and the memories revisited with new eyes. Cold cases are never truly cold. They wait. And when they wake, they do not just solve crimes. They expose how much can be hidden in plain sight, and how long the truth is willing to wait for the right moment to be heard. Time does not stop when a verdict is read. It rarely even slows down. It moves forward, dragging consequences behind it like a long shadow that refuses to separate from the ground. In the months after the sentencing, the case begins to change shape. What once felt contained, one victim, one perpetrator, one resolution, starts to expand outward, touching lives that believe themselves safely removed. The media moves on quickly, as it always does. Headlines shrink. Airtime shortens. The phrase "cold case solved" becomes a line item in year-end crime summaries. A triumph of technology neatly packaged for public consumption. But for those closest to it, the story does not end. It mutates. Detectives assigned back to their regular caseloads find themselves pulled into conversations they did not expect. Other departments call. Old files resurface. Names they recognize appear again in contexts that feel uncomfortably familiar. Patterns begin to overlap. Not enough to accuse, but enough to disturb. One investigator notices it first. A cluster of disappearances from the late 90s, all within a narrow geographic corridor, all involving women who lived alone, all marked by the same quiet vanishing. No forced entry, no immediate suspects, each one shelved with the same annotation. Cold case. For years, these files existed separately, islands of unresolved grief. Now, placed side by side, they begin to resemble a map. The investigator does not say it out loud at first. Saying it would mean responsibility. Saying it would mean reopening wounds that may never close. But the thought settles in anyway, unwelcome and persistent. What if this was not an exception? What if this was a pattern that survived because no one thought to connect it? The defendant's past is examined again, this time not as a singular narrative but as a timeline overlapping others. Where he lived, where he worked, where he traveled. Ordinary movements that once meant nothing now glow under scrutiny. There are coincidences, too many to ignore, too few to prove. Prosecutors resist the idea of expansion. The case legally is over. Appeals loom. Resources are finite. The evidence that secured one conviction may not stretch to another. And yet, the calls keep coming. A former coworker from the 90s reaches out anonymously. She remembers something she once dismissed. A comment, a joke that felt wrong in hindsight. A woman who quit suddenly. A rumor no one followed up on because there was nothing concrete to follow. Another tip arrives from a retired patrol officer. He recalls a welfare check he conducted years ago at an address now tied to the defendant's past. The call was routine. The house empty. Nothing to report. But the unease stayed with him. He writes because he cannot stop thinking about it now. Cold cases have a gravity of their own. Once disturbed, they pull everything nearby into orbit. For the victim's family, this is both validating and terrifying. They had believed the nightmare was finally contained, that their loss would not become a footnote in a larger horror. Now they watch as speculation grows, as online forums resurrect details, as strangers debate theories that feel invasive and cruel. They ask investigators not to let her become just the first. The investigators promise nothing they cannot deliver. Behind prison walls, the convicted man hears fragments of this unfolding narrative through filtered channels. Guard conversations, news snippets, the occasional letter from someone who once knew him. He grows quieter. He stops writing. The man who once clung to control now seems content to let silence reclaim him. Psychologists note this behavior in their reports. Withdrawal, avoidance, a retreat inward that suggests not peace, but containment. He is not absolving himself. He is fortifying. This too is familiar. In cases like this, truth becomes currency. Some spend it, some hoard it, some take it to the grave. Meanwhile, forensic technology continues its advance. Databases grow. Algorithms sharpen. The evidence from this case becomes a benchmark, a training example for how patience and progress can intersect. Other cold case units replicate the process. Some succeed. Some do not. Each attempt reinforces the same uncomfortable truth. Time no longer guarantees safety. The community begins to change in subtler ways. People speak differently about the past. Old neighbors reconnect, comparing memories like puzzle pieces, wondering how much they missed. Trust erodes in places it once lived comfortably. A man's friendliness is reconsidered. A woman's unease is retroactively validated. This is the collateral damage of delayed justice. It does not discriminate. Schools invite speakers to talk about awareness, about listening when something feels wrong. Police departments update protocols, emphasizing evidence preservation over immediate closure. Families learn new words, genealogy databases, probabilistic matching, that feel too technical to belong to something so personal. And always, the word cold case lingers, no longer synonymous with hopelessness, but with possibility. Not all of it good. Late one night, an investigator reviews the defendant's prison file. Tucked inside is an intake interview conducted shortly after sentencing. In it, the man answered a question he has never answered publicly. "Do you feel remorse?" His response was brief. "I feel tired." The investigator closes the file, unsettled. Tired is not remorse. It is not innocence either. It is the fatigue of someone who has held something heavy for too long. The case becomes a cautionary story within law enforcement circles. Not about brutality, not about evil, but about patience and the danger of assuming that silence means absence. It reminds detectives that some crimes are not loud. They are careful. They wait. For the victim, memorials become quieter affairs over time. Flowers are replaced by stones. Her name is etched into public memory in a way it never was before, not as a headline but as a lesson. She is remembered not only for how she died, but for how long it took to speak for her. Years later, a new detective joins the department. Young, idealistic. He reads the case file late at night, absorbing the details with the intensity of someone who believes every mystery can be solved. He pauses at the last page, where someone long ago scribbled a note in the margin. Never assume the past is finished. He underlines it, because even now, even after convictions and ceremonies and headlines that declare endings, the story has not fully settled. It lives on in the gaps between what was proven and what was known, in the questions that will never be answered, in the secrets that may still be buried, untouched by light. Cold cases do not end. They echo, and sometimes, long after the truth has been spoken loudly enough for the world to hear, they continue to whisper, reminding anyone who listens closely that justice, like memory, is never as complete as we want it to be. There is a strange moment after a cold case is solved, when the world expects the story to stop, but the people inside it realize it has only changed rhythm. The headlines are gone, the cameras have packed up, the courthouse steps are empty again, yet the air still tastes like metal, like something unfinished. Closure, in reality, is not a door that clicks shut. It is a hallway with lights that flicker, and somewhere at the end, a shadow that never fully steps into view. The family learns this first. Friends assume the worst part is over. They say the word finally like it is a gift. Finally, you have answers. Finally, you can move on. Finally, you can breathe. But the family does not feel air returning. They feel weight shifting. They feel the old grief rearranging itself, not disappearing, just taking a new shape, harder in some places, sharper in others. The missing years become their own kind of crime scene, filled with imagined outcomes, false sightings, nights of hope that now feel like cruelty in hindsight. The mother, if she is still alive, wakes up some mornings reaching for a phone that is no longer needed. The sibling, if there was one, replays childhood memories searching for the moment that innocence cracked. The father, if he has already passed, never got to hear the verdict, never got to see her name restored from rumor into truth. There is no courtroom sentence that returns those years. The calendar does not reset. It only keeps moving, indifferent. Detectives carry it differently, but they carry it all the same. A cold case solved does not wipe the board clean. It stains the board. It leaves a ghost outline of the victim's face over every new file that lands on a desk. Routine disappears. Every call becomes potentially historic. Every small piece of evidence becomes a potential time bomb waiting for the right technology, the right database update, the right analyst with the patience to listen. And that is the new horror. The past is no longer safely behind you, can be reopened at any moment. Inside the prison, the The man convicted of murder adjusts to a world that is designed to remove control. He is processed, assigned, counted, fed. Days become identical blocks, stacked without meaning. He learns quickly what most men like him learn. Silence is easier in a place where everyone is trapped with their own. He does not talk about the case. He does not join groups. He does not play the repentant sinner or the wrongfully accused martyr. He becomes invisible. That invisibility is not surrender. It is strategy. Because appeals begin, as they always do in cases built on long timelines and modern science. Defense attorneys file motions attacking the DNA process, the genealogy methods, the reliability of the cooperating witness. They raise questions designed not to prove innocence, but to manufacture uncertainty. They call it novel forensic technique. They call it prejudicial. They call it a case built on assumption. They want one crack. Just one. In hearings, experts return to explain what was already explained. Probability, chain of custody, cross-contamination controls. A jury convicted, but an appeal court does not look for truth. It looks for error. The prosecution knows this. Detectives know this. The family knows this now too, and the anxiety returns like muscle memory. This is the secret aftermath no headline mentions. Even after conviction, the case can still slip through fingers. During one hearing, the defense produces a new witness. Someone who claims the defendant was elsewhere that night. Someone who waited decades to speak because they didn't realize it mattered. Their story wobbles under scrutiny, but it does what it is designed to do. It disrupts. It forces the courtroom to lean back into doubt, if only for a moment. The family watches and the old rage returns. Not the dramatic rage that screams. The quiet one. The one that makes hands shake. The one that turns breathing into a conscious effort. They revisit the evidence again, knowing the defense will hunt for anything overlooked, anything misunderstood, any procedural misstep. They check logs. They confirm seals. They re-verify storage temperatures. They pull lab notes and chain of custody forms from archives. They prepare because the truth has already been expensive, and they will not let it be stolen now by paperwork. But beneath the legal battles, a different tension grows. The one no court can resolve. The question of motive. In the public story, motive is often simplified. Jealousy, rage, opportunity, a moment of violence. It makes sense because it fits in a segment, in a headline, in a documentary arc. But investigators know the real motive is often uglier. It lives in small entitlement, quiet obsession, the belief that someone else's life is available to take. And in this case, the convicted man never gave them the kind of motive that feels complete. He never explained why her. Why that night? Why a crime so careful it left almost nothing behind? That absence becomes a thorn. Not a legal problem, not a prosecutorial weakness, but a psychological wound. Families do not just want the name of the person responsible. They want the story that makes the nightmare understandable. Without it, the horror remains open-ended, capable of reproducing itself in the imagination forever. Then something happens that shifts the ground again. A prison counselor files a routine note in the defendant's record. The defendant has been having nightmares. He wakes drenched in sweat, disoriented, sometimes shouting. Staff members, trained to treat every claim cautiously, initially assume manipulation. But the pattern persists. The man does not ask for special treatment. He does not ask for transfers. He does not request medication. He simply exists, increasingly agitated, as if the walls of the past are moving inward. A guard mentions it casually to a detective who happens to visit the facility on another matter. The detective listens. The thought forms. People like this do not break in public. They break privately when no one is watching, when the performance is no longer needed. That is when the truth sometimes slips, not as confession, but as leakage, details surfacing in dreams, in muttered phrases, in the need to control a narrative that has already escaped. The detective requests to speak with him again. Not as a formal interrogation, as a check-in. The prison arranges it. They sit across from each other at a metal table, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the air smelling faintly of disinfectant and old concrete. The defendant looks smaller here, stripped of suburban normalcy, stripped of the illusion of being just another man. The detective does not accuse. He talks about time. He talks about how secrets rot from the inside. He talks about how the family has only one life and how they have already spent too much of it in the dark. The defendant's eyes flicker. His jaw tightens. He does not speak at first. Then he says something that sounds like anger but is not quite anger. "You don't get it," he says. The detective waits. "I lived," the defendant continues, voice low, "and every day I lived, I knew you were going to come back." The detective feels the hairs on his arms rise. Not because it is a confession, because it is an admission of expectation. He knew. He planned for it. He lived with the certainty that the past had not ended, only delayed. The detective leans forward slightly. "Then tell me," he says, "what you planned to do when we did." The defendant's mouth twitches, almost a smile, then collapses. His hands, cuffed under the table, shift restlessly. "I didn't plan," he says. "I just waited." Waiting is not innocence. Waiting is what predators do when they believe time is on their side. The detective tries a different angle. He asks about the other man, the one who testified, the one who admitted involvement. The defendant's reaction is immediate, sharp, a flash of contempt. "He's a coward," he says. The detective holds the silence, letting it stretch. "And you?" he asks. The defendant's eyes harden. He does not answer. But in that refusal, the detective hears something louder than any denial. The meeting ends without confession. Yet the detective leaves with the sense that the case has not revealed its final shape. That the story the public believes, one victim, one killer, one accomplice, may still be incomplete. Because criminals who hide successfully for decades rarely do it without practice. And practice has implications. The detective returns to the office, and late at night, he opens the board again. He looks at the cluster of disappearances. He overlays addresses. He studies old employment records. He pulls travel receipts, outdated but not meaningless. He runs the defendant's timeline against other cases like a blade drawn slowly across skin, searching for where it catches. The result is not proof. It is discomfort. The defendant was in the area of another disappearance 2 years earlier. The overlap is not airtight, but it exists. There was a job contract, a temporary assignment, a reason to be there. Then there is a third. A woman who vanished in 2001, a few counties away, also without forced entry, also without a body for years. Her case remains open, cold, quiet. The detective feels the familiar tightening in the chest. Cold cases echo. Sometimes the echo is just coincidence. Sometimes it is a pattern. He brings the information to a supervisor, careful not to overstate. Cold case units are used to disappointment. They are trained to distrust their own excitement. But the supervisor sees the same thing. The overlaps are enough to justify a review. Not a public review. A quiet one. The kind that begins with a single evidence box pulled from a shelf. A label read for the first time in years. A seal broken carefully under sterile light. The past begins to move again. And the community, unaware, continues living on top of it, believing the story ended at the courthouse, believing the monster was locked away, believing the word solved meant safe. But inside the files, inside the lab, inside the private nightmares of a man who can no longer control what he buried, the cold case does what it has always done. It refuses to stay silent. The evidence box comes down from the shelf with the soft scrape of cardboard against metal. A sound so ordinary it would be forgettable in any other context. But tonight it lands like thunder. The detective carries it the way you carry something that can change the past. 2 hands, careful grip, no sudden movements, as if the years inside might spill out and stain the floor. The label is faded. A case number from 2001. A woman's name written in block letters. A county seal. Beneath it, the same cold phrase stamped in ink that has outlived the people who first pressed it there. Cold case. He cuts the tape slowly, as if hesitation could delay what's coming. He breaks the seal. The scent of old paper rises, mixed with plastic and time, a smell that belongs to storage rooms and unfinished endings. Inside are envelopes, photographs, brittle notes from detectives who once swore they would never stop looking and then did. Not because they didn't care, but because there were no doors left to knock on. He spreads the contents on the table under fluorescent light. And immediately, something feels familiar. Not in the dramatic way of a perfect match, not in the easy way of a headline, but in the subtle way that makes a seasoned investigator's stomach tighten. The disappearance details, the lack of forced entry, the quiet vanishing that left no loud mess behind, only emptiness and questions. The timeline that collapses into a narrow window of vulnerability. The neighborhood that believed it was safe. He flips through photographs, kitchen counters, bedroom corners, door frames captured at odd angles, and pauses at one close-up of a doorknob, the kind of photo that looks meaningless to everyone except the people trained to see the invisible. A note is clipped to it, possible touch DNA, insufficient for analysis at time. Insufficient at the time. The phrase might as well be a prayer answered late. He checks the evidence inventory again, searching for the kind of small detail that can become a door. Swabs, fabric, fingernail scrapings, anything preserved with the kind of caution that suggests someone, somewhere, believed the future would have better eyes than the past. There it is. A sealed envelope with a warning stamp. Biohazard, handle with gloves. Inside, a swab taken from a surface the victim touched every day. A steering wheel, a clasp, a zipper, something personal enough to carry her, and possibly someone else. He holds the envelope up to the light, watching the paper glow faintly as if it's trying to speak. By morning, the lab has it. By afternoon, the lab has questions. By night, the lab has a partial profile. Not complete, not clean, but present. A shadow where there shouldn't be one. The analyst compares it against the databases used in the 1998 case, the ones that can now build families out of fragments and locate strangers through their relatives' curiosity. The screen flickers. Then it hits. Not a direct match. A relationship. A familial association that makes the room go quiet in the same way it went quiet when the 1998 cold case woke up. The numbers appear, cold and merciless. The statistical probability sharp enough to cut. The detective's phone rings after midnight. He doesn't answer it like a normal call. He answers it like an alarm. The analyst speaks carefully. She has learned to respect what these moments do to people. There's overlap, she says. How much? He asks. Enough that you need to see this. He drives to the lab through empty streets, headlights slicing through fog that wasn't there an hour ago. The city feels asleep, unaware that its past is rearranging itself in real time. He parks, flashes his badge, enters under humming lights. The lab is sterile, quiet, almost holy in its discipline. On a monitor, the analyst points to a set of markers, then to a line beneath them. This profile is related, she says. Not to the victim, to the man you convicted. The detective feels his chest tighten as if the air has thickened. Related how? Sibling? Cousin? Child? The analyst is cautious. She explains that the match indicates a close familial link to the convicted man's genetic network. It does not automatically mean he did it. It means the DNA came from someone whose blood is close enough that the database can hear the echo. The detective stares at the screen, trying to control the direction his mind wants to run. If the convicted man is the only perpetrator, then this could be nothing. An innocent relative in the wrong place at the wrong time. Transfer. Coincidence. A contaminated narrative looking for a villain. But if the 1998 case wasn't solitary, if there were others, if there was a shared secret, then this isn't just overlap. It's infrastructure. He calls his supervisor before sunrise. The voice on the other end is tired, then alert, then silent. They schedule a meeting with the other county's cold case unit. No press, no memos that can leak, no triumphant language, just professionals in a room, staring at numbers and photographs that don't want to be connected, but are. The other detectives arrive guarded. Their case has been theirs for years, their grief to carry, their failures to swallow. They are wary of outsiders bringing new hope that might end in new disappointment. Then the lab results go up on a screen. Then the old photographs appear. Then the room tilts. One detective from the 2001 case points to a map pinned on his folder. An old suspect list, mostly cleared, mostly forgotten. A cluster of addresses. A name that once seemed peripheral. It is not the convicted man. It is someone from his orbit. A cousin. A brother-in-law. A childhood friend who married into the family. Someone who moved often. Someone who lived close enough to both scenes to make coincidence feel like an insult. The detective from the 1998 case feels the same dread he felt at the excavation site, that sense of earth shifting under your feet while you stand there pretending it's solid. He asks the question he doesn't want to ask. "Did you ever talk to him?" he says. The other detective nods slowly. "We did," he says. "He was cooperative, friendly, gave us an alibi. We cleared him." The word cleared hangs in the air, heavy. Cleared based on what? Memory? Paper? A witness who can't remember clearly now? The detective doesn't say it out loud, but everyone in the room hears it anyway. Clearing someone in 2001 without modern DNA is not clearing. It's guessing with a badge on. They pull the old interview transcript. They read it aloud. The suspect's answers are smooth, almost too smooth, the kind of calm that either belongs to innocence or to someone who has rehearsed his story so many times it has become muscle memory. Then there's a line, a small line. The suspect says he never met the missing woman. But 2 pages later, he mentions a detail from her life that wasn't public at the time. Place she went. A routine. A habit. The detective from 2001 circles it with a pen, hand trembling slightly. "How did he know that?" he whispers. No one answers. Outside the room, the world begins to stir awake. People go to work. Children get on buses. Coffee is poured. Routine continues, oblivious. But inside the cold case units, a different day begins. One that carries the potential to crack open not just one story, but an entire hidden corridor of violence. Investigators request a new warrant. This time, not for the convicted man, but for the relative in his orbit. They pull his current address, his employment, his history. He is older now too. Another man who has aged into ordinariness. Surveillance begins again, quietly, professionally, like a ritual repeated with new names. The relative senses something before anyone speaks to him. The same pattern, different routes, a sudden tightening of routine. A man who becomes aware of eyes he cannot see. He stops leaving his trash out for pickup. He burns things in his backyard. Small fires that no neighbor can explain but everyone notices. Investigators don't rush. They wait for the moment that reveals the truth. Then the lab requests a comparison sample. A discarded coffee cup. A cigarette butt. A tissue left behind in a public place. The sample arrives in a sealed bag, taken with care. The lab extracts DNA. The markers appear. The profile builds. And then the numbers align. The relative's DNA is compatible with the partial profile from the 2001 evidence. Not proof of murder on its own, but proof of presence. Proof of contact. Proof that the story, again, is not clean. The detective sits alone after hearing the result, staring at the wall as if it might offer a less terrible explanation. This is the moment where the human mind tries to negotiate with reality, tries to bargain with the possibility that the 1998 case was not a singular nightmare, but a door that opened onto something larger, something systematic, something that lived under the surface of normal life for years. He thinks of the convicted man in prison, the nightmares, the statement, "I knew you were going to come back, not if, when." Because if he wasn't alone, then coming back wasn't a threat. It was an inevitability, a chain with weak links, a secret shared and therefore vulnerable. The detective requests another prison interview, not for comfort, not for closure, but for information. The convicted man is brought in, eyes tired, face thinner, a quiet hostility simmering under his calm. He sits, hands folded, the same posture as before, but the confidence is gone. He is a man whose illusion has been dismantled. The detective doesn't start with the 2001 case. He starts with loyalty. You called him family, he says. Did he ever call you family back? The convicted man's eyes flicker. One moment of irritation. One tiny involuntary shift that feels like a crack in stone. The detective leans in. We have DNA, he says. Not yours. His. The convicted man's mouth tightens. He stares at the table for a long time, as if the grain of the metal contains a safer world than the one he's in now. Then he speaks, low, almost amused. You don't even know what you're digging up, he says. It is the most chilling sentence the detective has heard since the case began. Not because it confirms guilt, because it suggests scale. You want to keep talking? The detective asks. The convicted man finally looks up. His eyes are flat. Careful, he says. Some doors don't close once you open them. The detective's heart thuds once, heavy, controlled. He doesn't blink. He doesn't let the man see fear. But inside, something cold spreads. Because the detective realizes the truth in that warning. This was never just about one woman in 1998. It was about how long someone can live in plain sight, protected by time, protected by silence, protected by the human desire to believe monsters are rare. And now, with DNA speaking across decades, with cold case files waking up one by one, the city's past is no longer buried. It is rising, and it is not coming up gently. The warning hangs in the air long after the prison interview ends. Like smoke you can't see but you can taste, bitter and stubborn on the back of the tongue. The detective drives back to the office with the window cracked open, letting cold morning air cut through the stale feeling that clings to his clothes. The city is waking up. Trash trucks, commuters, school drop-offs. Ordinary life marching forward as if nothing has shifted beneath it. But something has shifted. Because the moment a predator acknowledges the door becomes real. And when he says careful, what he's really saying is, you're close. The cold case team moves with the kind of precision that comes from years of disappointment. No celebrating. No leaps. No words spoken too loudly. They treat this like a bomb that might be wired to time itself. The target is the relative now, the man whose DNA sits in the evidence like a fingerprint left by the past. He has a name, an address, a job, a predictable route. He has a life built over the years the way people build fences. One plank at a time, convincing themselves it's enough. Surveillance watches him for days. They don't follow too close. They don't make obvious mistakes. They learn his routine the way hunters learn trails. He goes to work at the same hour. He buys coffee at the same place. He parks in the same spot, walks the same few blocks, nods at the same people. He looks normal. And that is the problem. Normal is how this hid for so long. Then the pattern breaks. On a Thursday afternoon, the relative doesn't go straight home. He drives out of town instead, through a stretch of highway that empties into older farmland and scattered storage units. He turns into a facility that looks like nothing. Metal doors, gravel lot, a bored attendant. He enters a code at a gate. Investigators exchange a glance through the windshield of an unmarked car. This is new. He parks near a unit at the far end. He unlocks it quickly, like someone who knows the exact position of every lock pin. He steps inside. The door closes behind him. Minutes pass, then 20, then 30. He emerges carrying a large plastic tote, the kind used for seasonal decorations, the kind meant to blend into the most boring parts of life. He loads it into the trunk with care. Too much care. His shoulders are tense, his movements tight. His eyes scanning the lot like he's searching for an audience he hopes isn't there. He drives away. The detectives don't stop him. Not yet. You don't pounce the moment you smell blood. You track. You confirm. You build a case that holds in court, not just in your gut. But now they have something they didn't have before. A location. A place where the past might have been stored, not buried. They draft a warrant the same night. The paperwork is thick, dense, careful. Every sentence is a brick meant to hold up what comes next. DNA association. Historical overlap. Witness contradictions. The prison interview. The storage unit visit. The behavior shift. The fires in his backyard. The sudden changes in routine. The judge reads it at dawn. Signs at 7:11 a.m. At 7:29, a team is outside the storage facility, staged and ready, faces set in professional calm. No sirens. No drama. Just purposeful movement toward a metal door that might contain nothing or everything. The lock is cut. The door rolls up with a screech that feels like the past resisting exposure. Inside, the unit smells like dust and oil and old plastic. Boxes stacked neatly. Furniture wrapped in tarp. A bicycle with flat tires. A mannequin torso in a garment bag. Everything ordinary enough to be forgettable, until the light catches something in the corner. A metal locker. The kind used in gyms, schools, workplaces. The kind meant to hold secrets behind cheap steel. They open it. Inside are sealed bags, vacuum-packed, labeled in handwriting that looks careful and controlled. One bag contains clothing folded with unnatural precision. Another holds photographs, loose and curled at the edges. Another holds a small bundle of jewelry. The detective's breath catches, involuntary. Because jewelry doesn't sit in a locker for decades unless it's waiting to be hidden. A forensic tech lifts a necklace with gloved fingers, holding it up like a relic. The chain is thin, delicate. The pendant is plain. But there is something about it. Something familiar from old case files, from descriptions written in the frantic early days of a disappearance. They photograph it, bag it, tag it. The chain of custody begins immediately, rigid as scripture. Then they find something that turns the air inside the unit to ice. A small notebook, not a diary, a ledger, dates, locations, names abbreviated into initials. Short, cold notes that mean nothing until you recognize what you're looking at. A record, not of life, but of control. Times written like appointments, distances measured like errands. A series of entries spanning years, scattered, inconsistent, like a man returning to a habit when the urge becomes too loud to ignore. The detective looks at one line and feels his pulse in his throat. A date from 1998. A location that matches the neighborhood where the first woman vanished. Another date in 2001. A location that matches the second disappearance. A third date. A third location. A name he doesn't recognize. The detective's voice is quiet when he speaks into his radio. We need to expand, because now it isn't just overlap. It's documentation. And documentation changes the story from maybe to what else. They don't arrest him at the storage facility. They let him continue his day. They watch him return to routine, unaware that the routine has already been dismantled. They don't want him to disappear. They don't want him to destroy evidence. They want him contained, and containment is easier when a person believes they still have time. That evening, he returns home. He eats dinner. He watches television. He steps outside and stares into the dark for a long time, like someone listening for footsteps that aren't there. At 3:17 a.m., the arrest team moves. They knock once, then again. He opens the door in sweatpants and a t-shirt, blinking under porch light. For a second, he looks genuinely confused. A man pulled from sleep into a world that doesn't make sense. Then he sees the warrant. Then his face empties. He doesn't ask why. He doesn't demand explanations. He doesn't say he's innocent. He just stares, as if he's watching something he predicted finally arrive. They cuff him, read him his rights. Neighbors watch from windows again. The same curtain corners lifted. The same quiet shock rippling outward. In the interrogation room, the relative sits in the same posture the convicted man once used. Hands folded, eyes forward, jaw tight. Different face, same architecture of restraint. Detectives begin gently. Background. Relationships. Where he lived in 1998. Where he lived in 2001. Where he was the nights those women disappeared. His answers are smooth, practiced, almost bored. Then they show him the storage unit photos. The locker. The necklace. The ledger. His eyes flick once, just once, toward the edge of the table, like a man calculating distance, escape, angles. The instinct appears and disappears, replaced by a forced calm. "What is this?" he asks, voice steady. The detective leans in slightly. You tell me, he says. The relative shrugs, a gesture that tries to make the world smaller than it is. He claims the locker belonged to someone else. A friend, a former roommate, a dead relative. He offers names that can't be verified quickly, hoping time will blur responsibility the way it blurred everything else. But time is not his ally anymore. They introduce the DNA. Not with rage. With numbers. He says nothing at first. He stares at the table, then at the wall, then at the detective's hands. His breathing is shallow, controlled, as if he's trying to keep his body from betraying him. He asks for a lawyer. The detectives expected that. They end the interview. But the case doesn't end with his silence. It begins to accelerate. The lab tests the items from the locker. DNA is extracted from seams, clasps, fibers. Profiles emerge, some partial, some startlingly clear. They cross-reference with missing persons databases, with cold case files scattered across counties like bones. Matches appear, one at a time, each one a new wound opening. The community doesn't know yet. The public still believes the 1998 case was the story, the monster caught, the chapter closed. But inside the cold case units, the board expands until the wall can't hold it. Photos multiply. Red string becomes data points. Names become families. Families become shattered histories. The detective returns to the prison for one more interview with the convicted man. Not because he expects cooperation, because he expects fear. The convicted man sits across from him, eyes tired, the same flat gaze, but now something has shifted. The confidence is gone completely. There is irritation, yes, but beneath it there's something else. Recognition. A man watching his fortress collapse. They got him, the detective says quietly. No reaction. We opened the unit. The detective continues. We found the locker. We found the ledger. The convicted man's jaw clenches. The detective watches the small muscles in his face, the tiny betrayals he can't control. You knew, the detective says. You knew there was more. The convicted man exhales through his nose, almost a laugh, but it has no humor in it. You think you're saving people, he says. The detective doesn't flinch. I think you're hiding, he replies. The convicted man leans back slightly, staring at the ceiling as if searching for a place to rest his eyes that isn't the detective's face. What do you want? He asks. The detective speaks softly, because this is the moment where volume is weakness. I want the names, he says. I want the places. I want the truth before it dies with you. The convicted man's lips press together. He is silent long enough for the silence to feel like a physical object between them. Then he says something that feels like a confession and a threat at the same time. You won't find them all, he murmurs. The detective's heart hits once, hard. How many? He asks. The convicted man smiles faintly, a thin expression that doesn't reach his eyes. Enough, he says. And then, finally, he adds one more sentence, low, almost intimate. He kept trophies, he says. I didn't. The detective feels cold spread through his ribs. Because trophies mean memory. Trophies mean repetition. Trophies mean someone didn't just hide a crime. They curated it. The detective stands, ending the interview before the man can retreat into silence again. Outside, the day is bright. Children laugh in the distance. Traffic moves. The city looks the same. But beneath its surface, a larger truth has begun to rise, and it is rising fast. A cold case solved in 1998 was never an ending. It was a spark. And now the fire is spreading through years the way flame moves through dry brush. Quiet at first, then suddenly impossible to contain. The moment the detective steps back into daylight, the world looks almost offensively normal, the kind of normal that feels like an insult after everything he's just heard. Blue sky, clean sidewalks, someone jogging with earbuds in oblivious, a mother buckling a child into a car seat, laughing at something small and harmless. The city moves as if it has never held a secret, as if it has never swallowed a woman whole and pretended the silence was natural. But inside the task force office, normal is gone for good. They call it a multi-jurisdictional review on paper, a phrase designed to sound administrative, manageable, something that can be handled in a conference room with coffee and binders. In reality, it's a widening crater. Every hour brings another file, another county, another detective with tired eyes and a case that never left his mind. They begin arriving with boxes in their arms like mourners carrying offerings. Some are cardboard, some are plastic, some are the old metal evidence lockers that look like they belong in basements and nightmares. Each box has a name. Each name has a face. And behind each face is the same headline the community once read with distant curiosity and now reads with nausea. Missing under mysterious circumstances. No signs of forced entry. No suspects. Case remains unsolved. Cold case. The word shows up so often it becomes a pulse. The ledger from the storage unit sits sealed in an evidence bag, but its contents have already detonated. Analysts enlarge the handwriting, compare it against known samples, map the dates, the initials, the locations. It doesn't read like a diary. It reads like control. It reads like a person marking time in a way most people never do, measuring not birthdays or anniversaries but opportunities. The first public announcement is cautious. A press conference with carefully chosen language. A spokesperson who keeps their hands folded so no one sees them shake. They confirm an arrest related to an older missing person case. They say the words ongoing investigation. They refuse to say whether more victims exist. But the community hears what's not said. Social media does what it always does. It rushes into the vacuum, turning rumor into narrative, narrative into certainty. Names are posted. Photos of the arrested relative circulate, paired with old yearbook images, old addresses, old comments people once laughed at and now reread with horror. Someone finds a picture of him at a neighborhood barbecue in 1999, smiling, holding a paper plate, just another man in the sun. The image spreads like a curse. Then the lab results start coming in. One match and the room goes still. A bracelet recovered from the locker belongs to a woman reported missing in 2003, 2 counties away. A hair strand pulled from a seam on an old jacket corresponds to a case from 2000 that was written off as voluntary disappearance. A necklace clasp holds touch DNA that aligns with a victim whose body was never found, whose family was told, softly, to prepare for the worst, and then left to rot in the uncertainty. Each match is not just evidence. It's resurrection. It's the past stepping forward, demanding to be acknowledged by people who have spent years learning how to live without answers. Families are notified one by one, and no matter how gently the words are delivered, they hit like gunshots. Some relatives collapse. Some go silent. Some scream. Some simply stare, as if their mind refuses to let reality in because it has survived too long on the thin fuel of hope. A father, older now, clutches a photograph he has carried in his wallet for decades and whispers, "So she didn't leave." He says it like an apology to someone who was never there to hear it. A sister, who was once a teenager when her sibling vanished, now sits in a kitchen with detectives and realizes she has lived more years without her than with her. The math is unbearable. The numbers feel like another kind of violence. The detectives become messengers of both mercy and cruelty. Mercy because truth is coming. Cruelty because truth is late. They watch families break in ways they've seen before, but it never becomes routine, not if you still have a soul. Cold case work is a slow accumulation of grief. It piles up quietly until you find yourself waking at night with faces you've never met. Meanwhile, the arrested relative remains silent. His attorney speaks for him, claims innocence, claims misinterpretation, claims coincidence, claims the usual defenses that sound reasonable until you stack them against the weight of evidence. In the interrogation room, he watches detectives like a man watching weather. Uninterested in argument, focused only on how long he has before the storm reaches him. But storms do not negotiate. The prosecution begins to build a second case, then a third. Each one is its own battlefield. Different counties, different judges, different juries that must be convinced not just of guilt, but of the idea that evil can wear a familiar face for years. Every case requires its own chain of custody, its own narrative, its own witness list. The system moves methodically, grinding, careful not to sprint and stumble. Yet the public cannot move at that pace. The public wants a single story, one monster, one ending. They want to point at a name and feel safe again. But this is not that kind of horror. This is the horror of time. The realization that a person can commit a crime, then live quietly through decades of birthdays, holidays, paychecks, laughter, and nobody knows they are sharing air with someone who carries graves inside their memory. The convicted man in prison becomes a footnote and a focal point at the same time. Reporters request interviews. True crime producers circle like flies. He refuses all of it. He sits in his cell, the walls close, the routine relentless, and the only thing that breaks his calm is the knowledge that his warning wasn't a bluff. Doors have opened. The past is flooding in. One night, a guard passes the detective a note, something the convicted man asked to be delivered to whoever won't waste it. It is only one sentence, written in shaky block letters. Check the river bend off Old Canyon Road. No signature, no explanation, just coordinates disguised as a memory. The detective reads it twice, then folds it carefully, as if the paper itself might cut him. Search teams are assembled before dawn. Quietly, no press, no spectacle. The detective knows this could be another manipulation, another attempt to control the narrative from behind bars. But he also knows something else. Men like this don't give away power unless it buys them something. Relief, revenge, control, a chance to rewrite themselves. They go anyway. Old Canyon Road is different now. New guardrails, fresh asphalt. But the land remembers. River bends don't change easily. Water carves patience into stone. The team walks the bank, boots sinking into damp soil, eyes scanning for disturbances that don't belong to nature. A dog stops. The handler freezes. The air changes. They dig. The first thing they find is fabric. Dark, decayed, tangled in roots like the earth has been trying to hold it together. Then bones. Then the unmistakable geometry of what cannot be denied. A body. Not the 1998 victim. Someone else. Someone who has been waiting in the dark while the world kept moving. News breaks hours later. This time, the press conference is not cautious. Cannot be. The community shock has escalated into something raw and electric. People stand in living rooms staring at televisions, hands over mouths, as the words scroll across the bottom of the screen like a sentence being read aloud to an entire city. Additional remains discovered. Possible link to cold case arrests. Authorities investigating connections. Cold case. Again. The phrase is no longer a category. It is a wave. The victim's family from 1998 watches too, and the feeling is complicated. Their case, their nightmare, opened the door. They wanted justice for her. They got it. But now they realize justice for one can reveal the absence of justice for many. Their relief is threaded with guilt they didn't ask for. Guilt that makes them whisper in private. What if we had found out sooner? The detective stands at the excavation site by the river bend and listens to the sound of shovels and the river's quiet insistence. He watches the evidence bags line up like coffins. He sees the way the earth releases secrets reluctantly, as if each one costs something. He thinks about 1998 again, the house with lights on, the cup of coffee gone cold, the quiet disappearance that became a headline and then became silence. He thinks about how close the predator might have been, how many times he might have walked past neighbors and smiled, how many times he might have been thanked for holding a door open. He thinks about the word trophies. He thinks about the ledger, and he understands the deepest cruelty of this kind of crime. It doesn't just take lives. It takes years. It takes trust. It takes the sense of safety people build like a home, board by board, until one day they realize the foundation was cracked the entire time. Months later, after the second discovery, the third, the fourth, the community stops asking, "How could this happen?" and starts asking, "How many?" The question becomes its own kind of terror. It hangs over neighborhoods like fog. People look at old missing posters online and feel their stomachs drop. They recognize faces. They recognize streets. They recognize themselves in the families left behind. In the cold case unit, the board now covers an entire wall, and still it isn't enough. Photos overlap. Dates cluster. Counties blur. The detective moves a thumbtack from one location to another and realizes he has stopped feeling surprise. He feels only that steady, grim determination that comes when you've seen what time can hide. At night, he sometimes returns to the original case file from 1998, the one that started this avalanche. He runs a hand over the faded paper, over the old handwriting, over the margins where some long-gone detective wrote, "Moved shortly after disappearance," like a footnote to a life. He thinks about the victim, not as a symbol, not as a headline, but as a person who woke up on an ordinary morning and had no idea her name would become a case study in how the future can reach back and speak for the dead. He thinks about the family, standing at a grave that took too long to exist. He thinks about the city, still living above its own buried history. And he thinks about the cold case phrase that once sounded like failure but now sounds like a warning. Because in the end, the most haunting truth is not that the case was solved. It's that it waited. It waited in a sealed envelope, in a degraded swab, in a smear of skin cells too small to matter until the world learned how to listen. It waited in a storage locker behind a metal door. It waited in the silence of men who lived ordinary lives while carrying graves inside them. And even now, with arrests made, with bones brought back into the light, with the community stunned into a new awareness, the detective knows something that never makes it into headlines, something that lives in the spaces between evidence and confession. There are always gaps. There are always names missing. There are always places no one thinks to dig. He turns off the office light, leaving the board behind him, the faces and dates and lines disappearing into darkness. The building is quiet. The city outside is quiet too. Somewhere in that quiet, a door is still open, and cold cases, once awake, do not close themselves.